like 3 Apple IIIs set up of various descriptions. A 3 Plus, a 3 converted to a 3 Plus, and just a very early 3. Now, Taylor, I looked on the Apple Washington Pi discs a moment ago, and they don't have the software typed in. Are you able to send me a disk image of the disk that has Bug Mania on it?
No, I don't have it, actually. And unfortunately, I wasn't diligent about getting the emulator to work, so I couldn't type it in myself. I understood, though, that somebody's got a disk somewhere of all those programs.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure where that exists.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been searching. I haven't been able to find it either.
Yeah. Well, it requires a lot of invocables. I assume those are all still in libraries somewhere, right? Some of them were proprietary.
Yeah.
I remember I had, at one point I probably had at least 15 or 20 from various sources.
Yeah, right. How are you going, Joe? What's happening?
What's that?
What's happening, Joe?
Everything and nothing all the time.
Really?
Yes, constantly. I'm trying to fix my camera glitch right now. There we go. Is it going to do it? Of course it's going to be completely broken. Stop being... There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, just living a life, trying to run a little hobby business, making parts for people to keep their old computers running, and trying to survive the storm that is the giant orange Cheeto at the moment. So, other than that, doing the thing.
Going great guns? So you're doing a memory board. Is the memory board going to be 256K or 512?
It is initially going to be 256, although, in theory, I believe, was it Bob Justice? I believe he gave me Gerbers or a schematic for a 512 board.
Yeah.
That is sort of based on the On3 512, but a little bit different.
Oh, okay.
But what I really want to do is just make a 256 board that just use a static RAM so that parts are easy to get.
Yeah.
More reliable.
Yeah.
I got it all figured out as far as like dimensions and the connectors required and all that stuff. But my first 256 board that I ran didn't function because I'm an armchair electrical engineer, which means I just throw chips at boards and to see what circuits stick.
That's so
and
awesome.
then when I fail, I punt. So we'll see.
Well, I have a son who's a genuine double E in Southern California. So if you want, and he's actually staying with me for the next month, hanging out here at the lake. So shoot me a schematic if you want some ideas.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah. He works for a consulting firm in LA that builds all kinds of weird stuff, including some actually space-rated stuff.
Yeah, right.
YouTube stream.
Excellent.
By the way,
yes.
Pity they use that upper bit, or you could do a 1 meg board. That I had a long discussion with some engineers about that once to see if we could do a version that worked around that, or substituted something else for that high order bit, but
it's like stand back while we redesign the entire infrastructure of the base machine. Hold on.
Well, actually, not so much. I think it's simply the fact that bit's reserved in the address space. I wanted to do that because at that point I wanted to outspec the PC, right? Because 512 wasn't going to quite do it, given 768 and the PC. And also we could use all of the memory if we could get a hold of it. So anyway, I'm sure Tim Gill would have found some handy use for that extra 512.
Wow, that's loud. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys there for a second and go and pick something up.
Okay, great. Sounds like Adrian's got a...
Is it this?
Yeah.
That's
Oh, that was feedback.
Yes. So we're going to need one of the. Can they hear us through?
I think that Madeleine and Andrew are having feedback between the two of them.
probably.
Yeah, guys, I'll fix it and come back to
They're
you.
muted.
We'll just.
Yeah, I seem to remember that.
Okay, you guys should be hearing us now.
Yep, a little bit of a feedback.
I'll turn this down a little.
I went through similar problems when I was setting up the ACMS, where you can switch between the cameras here.
Oh, yeah.
You have to go in and turn off monitoring of your own feed.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that should be a little better, I'm hoping. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Okay.
You're introducing us.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Adrian is here. So the live stream is running and online. Is the audio online?
Yes.
Okay.
This one's on.
I'll quickly just borrow that from you, just so that our people online can hear us. I don't know who to address, whether the laptop in front of me or everyone standing out there online. So welcome everyone to the Australian Computer Museum. My name's Adrian Franulovic. I'm the president of the ACMS. Thank you for joining us this morning for a 45th birthday of the Apple III computer. The Apple III computer is a very unique device. You can kind of just see that when you look at it. It doesn't really fit into the ethos of all of the other Apple's ecosystem and design language of the 1980s and 1990s. It very much was designed specifically for the business market. And so today we have Madeleine McAndrews, who's one of our board members here at the ACMS. She has put on an Apple III event for us today, and I'll get her to introduce our presenters today. Madeleine is a massive Apple III aficionado, and it's where she started in technology realistically after the Ohio Super, the Ohio 8.
Ohio Scientific Challenger 1P with 2K RAM.
Yes. But when Madeleine met the Apple III, it kind of changed her life. So I'm going to introduce Madeleine now, and we'll get on with this morning's event.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so the Apple III. One of the biggest issues that I have with social media and YouTube and I guess rumour mills in general is the sheer amount of misinformation about the Apple III. I think one of the things that we suffer from is YouTubers and people who, make short videos about certain products in the Apple lineup. They basically, if they say something negative about the machine, they're going to generate more views, and it's all about hitting on likes. One of the things that stands out to me is 95% of those videos about the Apple III online are always presenting misinformation, like an enormous amount of misinformation. And some of these stories, and I'll let Taylor and Joe talk about these in a little bit more depth. One of the things that I see happening over and over again is there were issues with this machine when it was released to market, and Taylor will confirm you for this. They announced it in 1980. You know, it was a radical departure from the Apple II and a better machine in an enormous amount of ways. However, Apple was so keen to get it to market that they had a machine that had some flaws, and there's no doubt about that. As Steve Wozniak has said, the first release of a bunch of machines had 100% failures. However, and this is a big however, that affected the first 6 months of the product. Taylor will probably agree with me. The initial release of machines had issues. They were fixed in terms of developing a new machine like the Apple III. The issues with the machine were fixed in an incredibly short amount of time. So after that, you've got these A3S1s and A3S2s going out in the public, and I've got to tell you, my experience, I wrote a suite of software for a leasing firm that was eventually taken over by a sander. The Apple IIIs in that business, they had, I think there were between 25 and 30 machines, and they were rock solid. Like absolutely rock solid. The first one that I bought in at the end of 1981 myself, until about, I don't know, until about probably 2010, 2011, that machine had never had an issue, not one. The power supply kept going. I lived in plenty of places in Queensland where, you know, you get an average temperature of over 40 degrees in summer, and that machine just took it all in its stride. So everything, not necessarily everything, but the majority of issues about the machine affected, you know, a very small percentage down here, and users managed to make a bit of a mountain out of a molehill. Anyway, Joe Strosnider is a bit of a legend. Joe creates new products for the Apple III today. The thing about the platform is I saw a talk at Kansas Fest about probably 8 or 9 years ago, and the fellow who gave that talk came out with some examples like the Apple III had no software for it. You know, there wasn't much available. And the thing about that comment is Apple released a manual in 1982, which was a broad overview of all of the software for it. And rather than kind of the 50 units that this fellow, you know, said this failure of a machine had, there's 600 or 700 titles listed in the manual released by Apple. I personally think that the primary issue for me and my friends were Steve Jobs did the announcement of this machine, and he said it blows the Apple II out of the water. He almost went as far as saying the Apple II is complete rubbish compared to this machine. Now, Apple II users are fanatical. It's like a religion for them. It's the best platform they've ever used or seen. Come along and tell them that their machine's rubbish, and you know, we've got this new one that's $7,000, like $3,000 less than my first house. Very expensive, and unfortunately, a lot of damage in that initial phase had been done. So today, I thought we'd get Joe and Taylor Pohlman. Taylor Pohlman was a member of the Apple III team, so at the coalface at Apple at the time. That that's something that, as Australians, we don't get access to, to somebody who was on the team. I'm very grateful to both John and Taylor for joining us today. And I guess we'll have them introduce themselves, and then we'll have a bit of a look at some of the information online about the machine and, explain what the truth is, what really happened. So, what do you think, guys? Who would like to get the ball rolling?
Two of the biggest myths about the Apple III that need to be lit on fire like a Viking funeral. Okay? And the first one is the overheating issue. Madeleine already touched it. And she's like 40 degrees Celsius. For those of us in 72 units, that's like 98 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like you're dead in seconds type of temperature. Of course, that's just part of the course. And the Apple III should work. And this is true. They do, right? This overheating issue was not a thing. It was overblown, mostly by contemporary media of the time, honestly, making crap up. Because they didn't like the Apple III, because they didn't understand the Apple III, and because it had this early reputation of unreliability. Which, to some extent, that was true. But they were trying to, pile onto it. As the sensationalism of a lot of this media. So, when you hear people talking about it overheating, lies, damn lies. Not real. The second thing is the reliability, is the whole drop it 5 inches thing. Now, this was suggested for that early series of machines, that first 14,000 or so that got the complete recall. In 2023, when Dr. Wendell Sander, of course Taylor probably knows Wendell, obviously, he came to Kansas Fest to talk about the Apple III because that was its 40th anniversary. That first 14,000, 100% of the problem were these silly little memory sockets, the memory connection on the side. They had the original ones we used had a bad habit of oxidizing very easily under higher temperatures. And yes, the Apple III gets warm. This is a thing. It doesn't overheat, it just gets warm. And so that's the whole drop it 3 inches, it seats it a little bit, and it fixes the problem. They recalled them, replaced them with sockets that were used in the appliance industry instead, that were more of a dual wipe socket. Fix the problem. Gone. Reliability problems? Gone. Eliminated. They just work, right? So any problem you have with an Apple III today are because somebody left it in an attic with those nice holes in the back and rats made a house. That's the only reason they're going to be bad these days. Otherwise, they just work. And if you're really, really worried about heat, you do like me and you just mount the board to a piece of plywood back here. And it's fine, but you're not going to have to do that. So those are my high level comments on all of that. It's just made up fluff by people who are trying to sensationalize something to sell magazines. So.
Yeah, Madeleine, mind if I jump in on that?
Absolutely, we're not worthy.
We can't hear you, but you're muted, Madeleine.
Okay, so
sorry.
I okay, great. Yeah, so sort of to clarify, when the Apple III was introduced in 1980, and by the way, the news said it's more anticipated than the IBM 86, if you remember right. Incredible publicity and so forth. I was the Apple II product marketing manager. So I was watching the 3 from the perspective of, was it going to be a competitor? And remember, Jobs, who I worked for directly for a while when I was the Apple II guy, had a real revisionist sense of history. If something was going to be a loser, it was discarded. If something was a winner, he was right there for it. And so at the time, it took a lot to finally convince Apple to do IIe because of that negative environment inside Apple. But let me go back. So I was the Apple II guy, and so I was watching it, and I was spending a lot of time with engineers. I always walk the halls in engineering anyway, when you're trying to flog a product that nobody likes anymore. And so I was very aware of the early issues with the 3. And unlike the head of product marketing for the 3, who was didn't like to go to engineering because they yelled at him to not ship. And so I was aware of both, particularly the hardware problems, but the struggle they had to get a layout, to even get the board routed. The machine routing software at the time wouldn't do it. It was too complicated. And remember, the original Apple III had a 2-layer board. So trying to get power, ground, and all of the rest of the stuff going on that board to work was a nightmare. And that was the other issue, Joe, about the socketing and stuff, is that 2-layer board was thin and tended to warp a little bit, and that didn't help with the chip seating anyway. So the thing got introduced. It got shipped way too early. I think it didn't actually ship till that fall when they finally got a layout. But I remember being called up to Dave Pohlman asked me to come up to a sales meeting in I'm going to say December of 1980, because it was becoming obvious that the initial units just weren't working. So he asked me to come up there because the Apple III group wouldn't. And so I told him the truth, and I told him we were working on it. At that point, let's see, it was early in '81 that I took over product support and had the responsibility for that turnaround program in the sense of getting good units out. It was pretty amazing. We swapped some units 3 times, and it was interesting to watch, because remember, to your point, Joe, this was an incredibly expensive machine compared to other stuff in the market, certainly personal computers, right? And so our customers were people who could afford it. And that meant they were lawyers, doctors, small business people, and they were understandably upset that this thing didn't work. But by the time we finished the turnaround program and shipped new units, I think we replaced 1, 2, or 3 times. And some of those people became our best advocates, because at the end of the day, they saw that we were willing to spend any amount of money. They knew what that costs, and we just said, ship the old one back, we're going to ship you a new one, and we just kept doing it till they got one that worked. And at that point, people were going, wow, these guys really are standing behind this machine. The other thing about it was, and it's funny, everybody complains about the hardware, but what they forgot was how fantastic the software was. Tom Root wrote an operating system that was the envy of everybody until some would say Microsoft stole who, by the way, had their source code sauce. Most people don't know that. But when Microsoft released DOS 2.0, that was the first time that there was anything on the market that was close to what the 3 could do, short of Unix machines, right? So once we solved that, and once we solved the hardware problems, and people started to figure out the operating system, that was the other irritating thing. Remember, the Apple II shipped with the Red Book, like from day 1, right? So everybody knew how it worked for what that was worth in terms of functionality. But they certainly could do pretty much anything they wanted. The world's greatest catalog of peeps and pokes, but it was all there for people to work with. The original product managers for the 3 simply didn't understand why it was so important to get the SOS manual out the door, the device drivers manual out the door. So it wasn't until actually late '82, I guess, when those 2 manuals came out and people actually could see, number one, what was inside the box, but also figure out how to exploit it. In the meantime, I was running a tech support group Russ Aldridge, that name may be familiar, Brian Stearns. Those were the guys that were helping developers literally one by one figure out the plug-in boards, the software drivers, the rest of the stuff that made it happen. So I took over the 3 in '82 to do what was called Let Me Reintroduce Myself. I don't know if you remember those buttons. I still have a few somewhere. That basically, and a guy named Joe who was working for David Scoffrey, who was my OS and software guy, essentially invented software evangelism. We put him on the road, and that's how Great Plains learned about the machine. That's how a number of developers figured it out. And of course, Tim Gill, who was the master of all software with the spooler and the word processor and all the rest of the stuff. So, by then, in 1982, Portia Isaacson, who was the guru of PC market research, said the 3 had 50% market share of systems over $10,000. So that would be a profile, a printer, a fully loaded 3, and so forth. So it, it got there. And then I left in '82 just as we were getting the 3 plus out the door.
Madeleine, can you mute your one and speak to the? Yeah, I think if you speak to that laptop.
Yes.
So turn off your mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll
Just
actually
come
go.
here and you can talk to them on the television. So walk around.
Okay.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Just drop it 5 inches.
I think, that's a recursive microphone.
So use this mic?
No.
No?
Just
Just
you
talk?
talk here. My laptop will pick you up.
Oh, okay, great.
You guys can hear us now? Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Good start. Joe, what's your favourite computer and why is it the Apple III?
Well, the Apple III, how can I put it? It is the wonderful, misunderstood underdog of the 8-bits of the early 80s. As Taylor was saying, and I really believe it too, SOS combined with the wonderful hardware capabilities of the Apple III ushered in a lot of paradigms that you really don't recognize until you look at it, until you really dig in and realize, that's where that came from. The concept of a hierarchical file system on a micro, that was SOS. SOS pretty much did that first. You've got the concept of device drivers that were fully installable, accessible through the kernel, and you talk through kernel calls to talk to your hardware in a way of like a hardware abstraction layer. So that compatibility is the name of the game, not the, I'm the programmer and I can take control. No. If you follow the rules, everything will just flipping work. That was the Apple III. That was SOS. That's what brought that to the game. And the fact that the Apple II, while it had colors, it had 6 colors, and it had a beat boot speaker, that's great. But the Apple III, full 16-color TTL RGB, baby. Text, you know how the Apple III, when you try to do text with the Apple II, when you try to do text with the Apple II in colors, you would get color fringing and all of that garbage because of the NTSC or PAL or whatever, the weird way that Wozniak created video, which don't get me wrong, genius, man's genius. Because the Apple III did it in its own correct way, where every single bit was an actual color. You could get text with color that you could read, provided you had the correct font. With the Apple II, it's like, 16 colors in all of the graphics modes. Do you want 560 bits by 280 in color? Yeah, you got it. It can do all these things. The expanded memory that was directly, it still just uses bank switching of the type, but directly accessible if you use the proper OS calls to do it. You don't have to do this weird, wacky running around building your own kernel to try to figure out how to slot stuff in and out. You don't have slinky cards that are in a slot that you fetch in a byte at a time from. You're just like, hey, I want to access this memory bank, and it's like, okay, you could just do it. It took IBM 2 years to come up with the same thing. Apple did it first. They did it first. And of course, my favorite thing is the fact that the Apple III, before almost any other computer, and even, business computers, high-end machines, before any of them, do you know that it had a 6-bit DAC for audio? So if you wanted to play audio samples, you could do it. And just tell the VIA, hey, VIA, can you go use DMA mode and go play that? I'm going to go do something else, and it would play your sound. Yeah! That is why the Apple III is awesome. Now think of this. Could you imagine if we had Apple IIIs out there that people would start to love again and start to develop more than just the software that was available at the time, but new stuff? Get a FujiNet, put the Apple III on the internet, and start developing games that you can play against the Ataris and kick their butt because Apple III is better. Wouldn't that be great? Let's do that.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, it can do it. You just got to program it. And so that's really what I think is some of the limitation right now is, yes, there's a lot of cool software out there, but there's not enough out there that is capturing the how can I put it, the imagination of the true capability of what the machine can do. Full, like, line by line, this thing can do line by line vertical scrolling. Did you know that? It can scroll the entire screen up a line at a time.
Yeah.
Let's make 1943 the arcade game for the Apple III. Let's do it. All it takes is somebody to do it.
Look, and that particular game would be especially simple to write in any of the languages.
And remember also that in addition to that line-by-line scrolling, Joe, one of the examples that I put in the Business Basic articles was how to use the character generator to do proportional spacing. Remember that?
Yes.
We had not only proportional spacing on output, but I did input routines that would actually put a cursor in between characters using the fonts, so that the font system and the soft fonts were just
on the fly changing of the characters on the screen.
Right. That's how Bugmania worked. That's how Bugmania worked. I just put a bunch of character strings together that were the bugs, and redefined the characters to be certain shapes, and then blasted them on the screen, just one string at a time, and it was incredibly fast. And remember also that you had software interrupts. The OS could wait at the event level. It didn't, and that was what Tim did to do the spooler. He rewrote the console driver so that it would wait at an event level and not hang around waiting for a key press. And so, as a result, you could run the spooler in background, for that matter, anything in background, because it would wait at a software level for you to hit something on the keyboard. A lot of the invocables, used that and made it so easy to program the machine, and so much fun to do stuff that I was doing proportional spacing just because everybody was, all gaga about the Mac and the Lisa, and I said, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Lots of fun.
That very rich interrupt structure makes for this cool thing called multitasking.
Exactly.
On an 8-bit computer, let's go.
Well, let's be fair and call it not a better than 8-bit computer because the extended addressing stuff, which was
true,
sort
of
like
18 bits.
Yeah, actually, because you could address the full 512. The difference is people said bank switching like that was a bad thing, and that was actually a mistake that the early product marketing guys made, was to refer to it simply as bank switching, because what was going on there was, of course, an interpreter could use the full address space, and you could if I remember right, went through source calls that would allow you to allocate memory in hunks. So there was a lot of functionality there. In fact, actually, Madeleine, I wanted to address something you talked about earlier about the Apple II people not liking the 3. I was at the intro, and again, I was the Apple II guy, so I was sort of tight with all of the user groups at the time. Apple Pie, Call Apple, all those guys. And when we introduced the Apple III at NCC in 1980, there was a special private showing to the heads of all the 2 user groups, and they were gaga. They were so excited, and particularly they had a bunch of questions. To your point, Joe, about do Apple II boards work in the 3? And the marketing guys were going, well, no, not really, because they weren't necessarily FCC capable, and the 3 was a Class B machine. I'm sorry, Class A machine at that point. But the answer was, yeah, they all worked. They plugged in, slots were the same, and
as long as they fit in the case.
Yes,
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But the problem was that the 3 marketing people wanted to keep it positioned strictly as a business machine, and they were very worried about hobbyists getting excited about it and possibly screwing up the, we're serious business kind of positioning they were trying to do. Remember, these were chip guys and classic marketing guys. They were not systems guys. And so they really actively discouraged the Apple II fans from digging into the 3 and trying to make it do tricks. And I was like, what are you doing? You're crazy. Of course, as the Apple II guy, I really wanted the 3 to succeed. I thought it was a great machine. I'm a systems guy. I used to work at HP. I did time-sharing systems, and I could understand what the hell was in there. But they were just like, look, it does word processing and spreadsheets, and that's all you need. It's like, no, I think there's a little more fun there than that, right?
At the end of the day, you want to play a game and have some fun. I mean, come on, right?
Well, remember that was the genius of the Apple II, right? So you bought it, quote unquote, to do spreadsheets, but oh, by the way, you had a couple of things on the side, and that was, and that was, it was the business software in the Apple II that justified people buying it for games, right? And again, there were parts of Apple that just kind of lost the fact that the attraction of the machine was a dual attraction.
And the delay of releasing a lot of the technical documentation didn't help. Right? They're like, not only do we not want you to play with it, we're not going to give you the information to play with it, even if you wanted to. Like, come on, guys!
Right. People had to go, again, we put a little evangelism person together, and I had the tech support guys, particularly for networking, because at that point, we had Corvus, we had ArcNet, we had, there was, and that was the one flaw, Joe, I think, in the OS at that point relative to networking, because the block file manager, which was a brilliant, concept in software, only could read one block at a time. So it was really inefficient when you started to put it on network and wanted to read, let's say, a K at a time or 2K at a time, right? So you had to break it up into single block calls. I remember having Bob Metcalf, who was the founder of 3Com, and his CEO in 1981, because they had just developed an Ethernet board. And I desperately wanted that board in the Apple III because they were doing it for the PC. And I already had all the rest of the networking I wanted. And when I explained, Metcalf was a former Palo Alto, star guy and everything like that. He really knew technology. And when I explained device drivers and the fact that he could write a driver that had a dot print and a dot file entry point, and I could get to his server, with no no problems. Whereas the PC, they had to write specific routines to talk to the server they were building. He was like, wow, let's go. Unfortunately, the networking group at Apple, dominated by Lisa folks, talked him into the plant stand they end up building. And they never did a board for the 3. But, it was there, but we just crippled it with lack of knowledge.
Was there a proprietary network card for the 3 or for the 2 for that matter?
I'm sorry, say again?
Was there a primary comms
Corvus
card for the 3
Corvus
or the 2?
was the most people ran Corvus networking in there.
Yeah.
And their technology again, ArcNet, which was a what was the IBM protocol that was parallel network thing? I forget. But yeah, there were several different types of networks. There was a hospital application, custom application for hospital administration on the 3, and it used a Corvus machine with I think 8 Apple IIIs on the network. It was written in Pascal.
Wow. I'm pretty sure it's called OmniNet.
Pascal, we were able to do some workarounds relative to the block file manager. Fun times.
Can I ask
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So, Taylor, I've got something here that I'm going to show everyone. I've brought something along very special today that you may have seen in your time at Apple.
Oh, yeah.
Not exactly an easy to find device. So this is a Twiggy drive that was designed for the Apple III computer. So a very rare, exceptionally rare prototype that was never released.
Do you have the disc?
Yeah, there's a great story behind the Twiggy. I was in a meeting with Steve, I want to say in 81, and late 81, maybe 82. And Sony came in to show Apple their 3.5-inch floppy drive.
Yeah.
At that point, it was 400 KB, right? And they were trying to get it adopted as a standard, and they knew if Apple picked it up, then that would push them over the line and get the volumes up. And so they did a whole presentation. They offered Apple manufacturing rights to that drive. They offered us, basically almost cost, for a period of years and stuff. And I remember walking out of the meeting with Steve, and he turned to me and he said, "Wait till they see Twiggy. We're going to blow them out of the water." John Bernard was convinced that the stepper motor driven drive and its dual head thing was going to work. The guy that invented the switching power supply, an ex-Atari guy, told me at the time they're going to have to use laser interferometry to align the heads. Remember, because it had the top and bottom heads were on opposite ends of the drive.
Yeah.
And it just, manufacturing, it was a nightmare. And so that was, Rod Holt was the guy, and a genius engineer. And he was convinced it wasn't going to work, and I was convinced. I did turn to Steve and say, those little plastic squares are kind of cute, and I can fit one in my pocket. And of course, 2 years later, Steve had to go hat in hand to Sony to get drives for the Mac when the Twiggy just cratered. But it's kind of interesting. It would have been fun to, actually, the thing is, Joe, by the time that drive was prototyped, I had an Apple III with the double-sided double-density drive, and that was, what was that, 500 KB, something like that, which was fine. So to me, there was never a necessity for that drive, as esoteric as it was. But that's pretty cute. I haven't seen one of those in the flesh for sure. Saw plenty of Twiggies in various stages of disrepair, I guess is the right word.
Yeah. Do either of you know where the terminology of e-box came from? So the
E-box?
yeah. So if you actually have a look on this prototype, I'll just bring it up to my camera. The actual logo is an e-box logo, and that terminology seems to be lost in the wilderness, because some people call it a unifile, but obviously the unifile was reused as the name for the later Apple 2GS drives.
Yeah, well, the dual version and so forth. Yeah, that was the thing. Is, remember, in those days, Apple had its own disk division, and they felt they had a charter. It was, in retrospect, it was a big mistake, but that was John Bernard and Wolfgang Kurtz, something I can't remember, but they were determined they were going to just basically make Apple into a disk drive company. And, that's where Widget came from. They tried to build their own hard drive. In fact, I used to have a Lisa with a Widget in it. And, oh boy, the combination of Widget and Twiggy. Widget was the 10 meg hard drive. So they were convinced they were going to be a disk drive company, and they hired a bunch of guys who liked to do disk drives and spent a whole bunch of Apple's money trying.
Yeah.
Not particularly successfully.
And talking about over-engineering on some of this stuff, I've actually got another product here I'll pull out.
Oh my.
Memory lane.
I was going to say, save that for Sotheby's. They probably would pay you a fortune for it.
They would pay me a lot for it, but it's not for sale.
Well, I have one thing that's not for sale either at Sotheby's, although they might really like it. Remember the Apple Pascal poster?
They're nice.
The really colorful one?
Yes, I do remember those.
There we go. I have the only one that was signed personally by Nicholas Wirth.
So
Right.
this is the Color Monitor 100 for those that don't know.
Oh, yes.
And I'll try and... They made it so impossible to remove from the box because it says, caution, damage may occur if you lift it using the bezel, but the only way to access the monitor is by lifting it from the bezel. So you have to kind of pull the phone out gently. So I'm going to do that now.
Do you want me to do a side or?
No, it's okay. Apple's beautiful packaging.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. Joe, you agree, kind of second this too. The lack of a decent low-cost color monitor for the first couple of years of the 3 really hurt us because
Did not help.
And remember the sort of slow phosphor green monitor that was created because we thought we were going to ship interlace mode, early on, which didn't show up, of course, till the 3 Plus. But everybody complained about the crappy green monitor.
Yeah, so
because
what you guys can't see on your monitors here is that Madeleine's actually got a white phosphorus Apple 3 monitor 3 here in the front, and then we've got the green phosphor on the side. Now, I've heard a rumor that there was also basically a hen's teeth amber version as well. I don't know if that is just a myth, but I definitely know that the white Monitor 3 is very rare to find.
Yeah, I never saw an amber. That might have been. It could have easily been an overseas product, but or something local. But the only ones I knew about were the very rare white one, but the green one, which we produced in enormous quantities, and then stuck a bunch of Apple II users with in that. Remember?
And here's a special little stand, so it'll sit on top of your Apple II and not wobble.
Right, and look and fade like crazy when you're trying to play fast games. Yeah, it was. But when they did the bundle for the family promotion, I think it was Christmas '81, I guess, or Christmas of '81. They stuck everybody with those green monitors, and dealers were complaining because they were stacking up in the back of the dealerships because no customers wanted to buy them.
Yeah.
And so the reason I pulled out the Color Monitor 100 and say over-engineered, for the people here or online that don't know, the Color Monitor 100 has a very unusual function, and that is that you adjust the tilt of the monitor through a switch, and there's a motor in there that actually mechanically motorized tilts the display up and down for you, so you don't have to push like the Apple II screen.
Heaven help you if you accidentally push on the screen
100%.
and break the entire gear system inside it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, there were a lot of brilliant ideas at Apple, and a few that weren't sort of worthy if you.
Yes.
Not necessarily, and that monitor, not necessarily a bad idea. Execution, a little bit,
Yeah, well, the motors tend to, in shipping, the motors tend to break off and smash the back of the CRT, the neck.
Yeah, it was interesting, and it wasn't until, and I guess it was the late 80s when I went back to Apple and I was running service, that we put together a serviceability group that had to pass on engineering's ideas, and basically we controlled warranty cost. And so things that broke easily got engineered out pretty early, because by the time we added warranty costs to the cost of the manufacturing, product management decided they were going to do smarter things.
Now, speaking of color video on the Apple III, hopefully everybody here knows that even without a special, magical, expensive, hard-to-find, crazy rare color monitor, you can get color video out of your Apple III today for relatively inexpensively. So the Apple III is notorious for having the black and white jack on the back of it, which some say was just to accommodate that interlaced mode. Some say it was intentionally so people didn't hook it up to their TV like an Apple II. There's lots of stories. Which story is true, I don't know. But one thing that is true is the wonderful little 15-pin connector on your back of your Apple III does have full color, quote, NTSC. They might have PAL versions in PAL regions like Australia as well. But it has that full CVBS color signal on the back of it. So if you have the right little adapter doodle and an old school color TV or color 15 kilohertz monitor type of thing that'll take a standard composite video signal, your Apple III's got color, and you don't need any fancy monitor. That said, the color video that comes out of that connector is garbage, because it's basically it's exactly the same protocol that is in the Apple II. So you get a lot of that color fringing and stuff still, but it is there for those who want to hunt down the mythical color Apple III.
Yeah, and I think part of that may have been to make the emulator, or not really an emulator, but the Apple II mode work. But it's interesting you mentioned that, Joe, though. The original product marketing team was completely paranoid about FCC Class B versus Class A, right? So, and I was the Apple II product marketing manager that introduced the Class B Apple II. Remember the one that was coated inside with special metal paint and stuff like that. Whereas the Trash 80 and the Commodore PET never passed Class B. But the A was a business machine. We sold it to the FCC essentially by saying, hey, it's never supposed to meet Class B. So any dongles or stuff like that, or any video out the back was going to potentially, in their mind anyway, hurt the positioning. And they didn't want FCC down on us saying, hey, you're trying to use a Class A machine and a Class B application. So there was some paranoia about that, which unfortunately I think was overblown, to say the least.
Well, one of the things that, to shift gears a little bit here, one of the things that has become common problem with the Apple III is replacement hardware for bits and pieces inside the machine. Most of the Apple III, most of it, is off-the-shelf TTL logic that you can still just get. And some of it is a little bit rarer, like the 2112 chips, memory chips that are used for the video frame buffer. You can still kind of find those. But some of those chips are bipolar ROMs that, if you can find them, it requires weird special hardware to program them in an old PC or something with some weird software and all of this other stuff to do that. And the other big thing that is hard to find is, of course, the keyboard encoder. The keyboard encoder in the Apple III is
where could I buy one of those?
Yeah. What?
I could buy one of those somewhere, I believe.
Yeah. I may or may not be talking about that in about 30 seconds. No, but the keyboard encoder is that it's the same encoder that's in the Apple II, but they had it mask programmed by General Instrument with the Apple III's specific bit patterns, which means up until relatively recently, if your keyboard encoder died, your only way to get one was to steal one from another Apple III, which sucks.
Yeah.
And so my little story is that it's been about 5 years now. One of my friends in the Apple II community, boo Apple II, yay Apple III. He wanted to trade. He wanted an old Mac, like an old classic Mac, for something or other, and he traded me these two Apple IIIs for a classic Mac, and I get these Apple IIIs, and I ran into that problem whereby the keyboard encoder, because it was this weird, it like had weird 12-volt bias logic on it or something like that. It was susceptible to static. Now, it's only susceptible to static if you're getting inside and are mucking around with it. If you're messing with the machine from the outside, very rare that the encoder will die. But like stated before, these Apple IIIs became mouse houses. So that did not fare well for these keyboard encoders. And I'm like, I am not going to go and find another Apple III and steal its keyboard encoder to make this Apple III work. So I decided at that point, I'm going to make a keyboard encoder. Gosh darn it. I just like, it has to happen, right? This old machine needs to work. And it's my same theory for every old machine. We love these things. If nobody takes care of them, they will fade away and they will no longer exist. And that is bad. No longer exist equals bad. So I created the keyboard encoder for it. If you follow my YouTube channel from a billion years ago, the keyboard encoder logic that I use is effectively the same as for my single board 6502 computer I was designing called the JCM1 computer. And I just took the data sheet for the AY keyboard encoder, wrote it up, and made, that little guy. Plug in direct replacement, and it worked magically. And and that kind of actually started my own entire 8-bit business where I'm like selling all types of things. But I wasn't going to stop there, because what else is inside that machine that is unique? Every single one of those bipolar ROMs, as I was talking about, like you can't, like I said, you can get the chips. They may work, they may not. If they're already programmed, you don't know. You have no idea if you're buying a chip that's already been flashed or something and they're one-time programmable. So you just wasted $8 on a chip. And then you've got to find this like weird DB25 parallel port thing that runs on DOS 3 from a program from 1984. The program, it's dumb. So to make the Apple III live for those few cases where those bipolar ROMs fail, I made those little things, right? So I had a working Apple III. I dumped the ROMs and created this little carrier board that uses a ROM that is like 1,024 times larger than what it has to be to do the job. Put it on the little carrier, solder on the little pins, and hey, we've got replacement parts. We got a full set of replacement parts for an Apple III. So now every Apple III that is broken that still exists can be saved. Period.
Fantastic.
Do it.
Fantastic. I was before I left Apple, I was trying to put you out of that business. We had envisioned an Apple III that broke the keyboard off separately.
Yes.
And used an encoder, the COPS chip, I think, at that point, to basically create a movable keyboard, and just left the Apple III box in the same way. I mean, if the way the design works, it's almost a natural. You just want to saw that little piece of metal off at the bottom there, so that there were a couple of things like that we wanted to do with the 3, but there was no money for engineering at all. We were lucky to get the Plus out the door. The other thing is we were wanting to do a daughter board because the processor of the 3 is really not the 6502 only. It's all the rest of the 0-page circuitry and everything else, right? And what we wanted to do was a little daughter board that had 6502 on it, but also the rest of the associated memory addressing, with the idea that at one point we could use maybe the 65816 or some chip like that would a custom chip that would do all that in one thing and make life simpler. But that never got done anyway. But and part of that is people always thought, oh, it's just a 6502 machine, which it obviously is not. We wanted some zero. There were a lot of things hardware-wise that Wendell had in mind that would be easy to do if we'd had a little engineering.
Yeah, from the microscopic view, it's a 6502 with a whole bunch of other logic. But from the programmer's perspective, that 0-page intercept logic, the 8F auxiliary memory extension, those things, the CPU isn't doing that. The underlying logic halts the CPU, captures it, does stuff, and gives the CPU back so it can work on this thing. And from the programmer's perspective, it just looks like it's an extension to the 6502 system, and it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing that almost made it out the door was the 68000 board for the 3, the virtual memory board that Wendell designed. After I left Apple, I worked on getting that, and I actually got Santa Cruz Operation to commit to a port of Unix for it. I don't know if you know if people know about that board, but basically what Wendell designed was it had virtual memory that paged out of Apple III memory. It had its own memory, and then it paged out of Apple III memory, and then extended from there to page to the disk. And so I even almost talked Hertzfeld into a Mac port for the thing, but Steve said he was like a year behind on the Finder, and Steve said, if you even go near that project, I will skin you alive. So that never happened. But but Apple seriously considered putting that 68000 board out the door with a Unix on it.
Yeah,
that would have really extended the life quite a bit. And that was basically the same way that the CPM card for the 3 worked. Is that it actually ran the Apple III at quarter speed, fifth speed, something like that, every 4th or 5th cycle. So it could use all the I/O in the Apple III without having and the device drivers. And that's how Microsoft actually wound up with the source code of SOS, much to a couple of engineers' chagrin. And then, of course, they released DOS 2.0 shortly after that, and it looked an awful lot like SOS.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that hierarchical file system and installable drivers and TSRs. Ooh, those are great ideas. Boys, why don't you just turn your heads and cough?
Well, it turned out the same guy that did that project for Microsoft, the DOS 2.0 project, was the same guy that did the CPM board for the 3. So there was no Chinese wall at all. Interesting. I told legal after I left to sue them, but you know.
They had their hands full with another law case, I believe. A lawsuit.
I'm sorry, what?
They had their hands full with another lawsuit at the time, I think.
Yes. Yeah. My buddy Dan Winden was he fought the Clone Wars, but then he got pressed into that suit.
So Joe, how are the peripherals going for you? You must be doing pretty well, with the soft cards and the Titan boards.
Yeah. So there's this website you can go to if it shows on my screen. Shameless plug. But no, I have a whole bunch of different things for the Apple III, so you can expand your capabilities or on the Apple III or keep it running in ways that don't require you to pay some crazy exorbitant fee to some eBay scalper or whatever. What do you guys have? Gumtree down there? Similar things down there. Of course, we've got the soft cards. These are out of stock right now because the Z80s are a little hard to find. Zilog, you suck. Why did you discontinue the Z80? So I have to second source them from UT source and weird places and whatever. But yeah, I am going to run more of these sports. But you got the soft card if you want to CPM and be boring. The Titan cards are also available, so if you want to re-enable the full Apple III or the full Apple IIe capabilities, you can do that. Yes, I have to say that you still don't get color video on the Apple II modes, and that's a thing. That's a whole other thing that has nothing to do with the Titans themselves. But the other thing the one thing I want to say about color video is finding the M100 RGB monitor that's quote meant unquote to go with the Apple III. Again, hen's teeth, and if you get it, it's necked or the gears are broken or anything like that. So that's why I made this little thing, if I can put it up here, the universal Apple III RGB adapter. So you plug this into the back of your Apple III and you get 3 different color video modes. You can plug it into a CGA monitor, and it will actually, the ROM chip here will actually convert the bit patterns to the closest CGA color match, and it looks surprisingly good. Not perfect, because the Apple III's color scheme is a little weird because it's inherited from the Apple II, but it is what it is. It also has the color composite video output. So if you just want quick color to go to your television, you can do that. And the final thing is this guy right here. This, with all of this extra circuitry in here, converts this to 15 kilohertz analog RGB. So if you have an Apple II GS monitor, you can plug that right into that and get the entire color of the Apple III on your Apple II GS monitor. Or if you want to wire up a little adapter doodle, you could connect that to an Amiga monitor. If you're one of those Amiga heathens, you could connect that to an Atari monitor. If you're like a Jack Tramiel lover, you can, whatever you want to do, you can do that. You can connect that up there. But so you don't have to have one of those crazy hard to find monitors. And they come with a pretty 3D case too, so that's a cool thing. So that's really what I've been trying to do in the Apple III, is to have these little bits and pieces to try to, sweeten the deal, sweeten the pot a little bit for the Apple III, and make it not just this mystery machine, but make it something that you can actually explore and use and have and play and have fun with. And I do have some other future plans for Apple III cards. One would be, so we all know how the good old 4164 RAM that is in the Apple III and about like every other 8-bit or similar computer of the time is garbage, and they fail, especially if they're the MOS semiconductor stuff or the MT Technologies RAM. All that stuff is evil and needs to go away. I have worked a little bit with Bob Justice. He was supposed to be here today. He's not here for some reason. He was able to get me some of the specifications for a 512 board that was related to the ARM 512 board, but it's not the same thing. That in combination with some other folks I'm working with, I'm trying to get a static RAM 256K board for the Apple III, which means a single chip in the middle of the thing and a couple little buffers, and it's done. And you never have to worry about sourcing weird old, no longer made chips again to keep your Apple III working if you've got bad RAM.
Hey, Joe, would that, pardon me for interrupting, but would that run, could you run that then at full clock speed since it's static?
That would be the hope, yeah. New static RAM is insanely fast.
My point is, if you don't have to refresh it, then you shouldn't. Yeah, then it should be like lights out speed. There's no need to clock it down for a refresh cycle. That would be cool. That gives you a performance boost right there, in addition to the RAM.
It's not as straightforward as some other infrastructures are, because the Apple III actually has a 16-bit data bus because of the way that the video circuitry does the byte fetching for video.
Right.
I'm going to go off the rails for a second because I just find this interesting, and maybe other people out there find this interesting. It's a little piece of information that's not really known well. So the Apple II, when 80 column was shoehorned into that, it basically would run the video system at basically at double speed at 14 megahertz instead of 7, and every 7 megahertz cycle of whatever you would do, it would do half on the main RAM, flip a bit, and do the other half from that auxiliary RAM, and kind of vibrate it back and forth. The Apple III did it more correctly. And what it would do, it would fetch the odd column and the even column the same way the Apple II did, but it would do it at the same time over this special 16-bit data bus that it had. And trying to get 8-bit RAM, a single 8-bit static RAM, to talk to both of those at the same time, not easy, right? The infrastructure of the RAM board it's designed to have these kind of two separate banks. You can access it from either side, but you got like these two separate 8-bit banks that it's pulling from at the same time. But if you've got an 8-bit static RAM, you can't do that. So you've got to have two separate sets of RAM, the same way as you have these big long sets of single chips and all of this banking. In addition, because all of the signals that are going up to this RAM board from the Apple III are assuming that is dynamic RAM. Dynamic RAM has a smaller address space, so to speak. You've got this row column address stripping. So what it does is it's latching in half of the address on one clock cycle and another half of the address again. That's not how static RAM works. Static RAM is expecting the entire address all at once. So you've got to undo the hardware that was done on the logic board to recombine that address all at once, or it doesn't function. And that's tricky, right? It's easier said than done. So, of course, the wonderful folks at On3 have done a lot of the extra work to make 512 work. So we have to reverse engineer some of that as well if we want 512 to work. That includes you have to change one of the proms on the board and maybe run a baud wire or something to get access to that extra memory bit.
Yeah.
We can't get to 1 meg, unfortunately, because that very top memory bit is reserved for some internal function. I don't remember exactly what it is. But getting that working is going to be a big thing, because then memory reliability, which again was not a problem of the Apple III, it was a problem with anything that used 4164 RAM that is now 45 years old.
Right.
We can resolve that issue. We can just get rid of it. It's not a problem anymore. So hopefully,
interesting. Had we had a little more money and time and engineering, we would have solved that problem a different way. The idea was to separate the video RAM out into its own bank, and therefore solve and make that static, and therefore solve the refresh problem, so that regular quote unquote memory could then. And the other idea about that was, if we did it that way, we could do multiple banks and increase the resolution. Both color as well as black and white grayscale. But yeah, so that was an obvious change, because just waiting for the refresh because of the way it interleaved was frustrating. It hobbled our performance when we really didn't need to have it hobbled. And we could have also upped the clock rate to the full, to 3 or 4 meg, or well, you multiply by 4 because of the pipeline, right? So, so that would have given us really beat the PC, which is what I was trying to do.
Can you imagine that? Wouldn't that have been great? A 4 megahertz Apple III.
Yeah.
That would have destroyed everything on the market. Just absolutely annihilated it.
Well,
anyway,
the key was,
2 megahertz right now. It's fast. The Apple III's fast, guys.
well,
It is
but
fast.
remember the issue though with the with pseudo DMA, right? The software DMA runs at only 1 megahertz, and that was an issue with the profile because the Lisa guys wanted 2 megahertz rate, and they had to slow it down to 1 in order to accommodate the 3 because there was no market for Lisas, so forth. But if we could have jumped the clock rate up on the 3, we could have run pseudo DMA at 2 megahertz and just had the world by the horns from an I/O standpoint.
Yep.
Oh well, once upon a time in the West, right?
Right. So my question out there to the group, everybody listening, what do you guys want to see the Apple II or the Apple II? I keep saying Apple II like some sort of heathen. What do you guys all want to see the Apple III do next? What do we want this thing to be able to do? Like, I don't know, be accessible to where you can actually find one? Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be great? I think that would be awesome.
I think one of the major issues with the Apple III today and the current user base is in 1979 and 1980, we couldn't afford software. We couldn't afford to go down to, Computerland and spend $39.95 on a game. And, that was basically, there was a bit of pirated software getting around then, but not like mid to late 80s. It was, completely out of control. And I think one of the things that's died is that kind of that drive that says to you when you had one of these machines and you were sitting down with a few bits of software, the first thing that occurred to us is, well, I'll write my own. So I think programmers' tools would be great. As a product. And Joe, 2 of these machines here today have your RGB adapters hanging out the back. They've both got keyboard encoders from you, and one of them has a couple of the other little ROMs from you as well. And just having as we said earlier, just having the ability to get new parts for these things, you've been a godsend. No two ways about it.
I try.
Well, it would be great to have a source of sort of refurb units. Right now it's problematic if you get something on the net and you may or may not work. It may have to be recapped. Who knows? I think it'd be great if there was a refurb store, and I'd also like to see, frankly, an organized collection or I'd like to see more work on invocables for Business Basic. Oh, hello, yeah.
Is that a new logic board?
Yes, this is somebody cloned the logic board of the Plus. I think this is the Plus logic board. No, this is a pre-Plus logic board.
Right.
But I got this randomly from somewhere. It's got like typos on it and stuff. It is not great. But I got it as a curiosity off of eBay for way too much money. But something like this, but designed around the Plus, because the Plus's layouts, they solved a lot of the electrical gremlins.
Right.
Using surface mount components that can be mostly assembled by a machine to get the board to be half the size. With the static RAM built right on the board, with that built right into it. Wouldn't that be great? Because then you could play with actual Apple III hardware with Apple III peripherals.
I've got an idea.
And not have to pay $14,000 in shipping fees to get one, because they weigh 80 kilograms.
How about
in a custom case with a detachable keyboard?
Yes. How about the Apple 3 Plus Pro Max.
Yes.
Well, the detachable keyboard would be great because the 3 itself, I mean, even with the classic motherboard, wasn't that big a footprint. And you could, with a redesigned board, you could make that footprint even smaller, put some put a lot of stuff in there. Well, let's see.
I think we should just do an Apple III.
I mean, from a peripheral
laptop.
standpoint, you've already got parallel and serial, so there's not a lot more that you might want.
Fan as well.
We could do an Apple III laptop, or Michael, he was saying,
There you go.
add an Apple fan to the unit.
But don't connect it.
Yeah.
You know, the other peripheral that almost got out the door that Hertzfeld worked on actually for the 3, and this was supposed to be part of the 3 Plus introduction, was a graphics board, a plug-in graphics board using the NEC 7220, I think it was. That was a high-performance, more not a bitmapped, but there was the Apple III graphics package was going to use it, and its resolution was outstanding, and it would have been it would have given you a display capability similar to the Sun at the time, and that actually was prototyped and running. I saw it in the lab. It was beautiful.
Oh, to only go back in time and somehow like walk out of the Apple lab with something under my arm.
There was a lot of stuff. Although it was so tricky, there was so much esoteric knowledge that was in the lab that never made it into documentation. I remember when we first laid out the new Apple II board as part of the cost reduction. They laid it out and used the old diagram, and it didn't work. The video didn't work. But come to find out that Woz had carefully positioned 2 traces on the original Apple II board to create capacitance. He saved a capacitor by spacing the damn traces. Exactly.
Oh, not Woz doing weird things like that. No.
I mean, I understood him taking chips out of the thing, but taking a capacitor out seemed to be. But but nobody could figure out why the damn thing didn't work until they discovered. I guess they either talked to Woz or talked to Wendell or somebody and said, "Oh yeah, well those traces are actually a capacitor." It's like, oh god, it was a lot of that stuff. Anyway.
One of the things that I see, I don't know, how do you guys go with all of that misinformation? Like, personally, I see something new come out and I'll watch a couple of minutes of it, and and just immediately there will be some ridiculous fact about the machine that makes no sense whatsoever. I get a bit of anxiety about it. It's like, oh, for God's sake. How do you guys go with that?
Smack it down.
Well, I posted the truth for a long time, but I remember there's a great cartoon that I saw a long time ago, and it's a couple, and the wife is in bed and the guy is sitting at a desk next to the bed typing away on his computer, and the wife says, "Honey, please come to bed," and he says, "I can't. Someone is wrong on the internet."
Yes.
And it's so, what I discovered is it's so futile, Madeleine, to
right.
These people they pop up like weeds and they don't pay any attention, and then I get every now and then I get a comment back that says, I'm glad somebody stood up for the 3, but by and large it's just evacuating into the wind. So
Screaming into the void, I think, is the term we use these days.
Exactly, railing against the man and the system. Yeah, so I've kind of given it up. I think people who know, and everybody else it doesn't matter because it's not like the people who read those posts have an Apple III, or
Right.
even want to get one.
Yeah.
And so we've got a double-edged problem here, is that we have all of this bad press, I'll just call it bad press, the fake news, whatever you want to call it, misinformation, about the Apple III, in combination with the fact that there aren't many Apple IIIs out there. At the maximum, there were 140,000. Call it a success or a failure from the perspective of how many Apple IIs were sold. That is just an outright failure. Because of that, there's nothing to care about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
From the broad perspective of the entirety of retro computing or vintage computing, whatever term you wish to use. Depends on how you use the computer, I guess. It's like Taylor said, it's just you're screaming into the void. Well, we fix that, one, by continuing to evangelize the fact that that is wrong. And when we see about it, we correct them. And when possible, we bring receipts, which if anybody wants it, I have a wonderful YouTube link to the 2023 interview with Dr. Sander himself about a lot of these things. And he dispels all of it. He's like, well, here's how it actually was because I was there and designed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we can do that. But in addition, we can do things like making things to make the Apple III more accessible.
Yeah.
Right? Let's make the ones that are there fixed, but let's do things like, I don't know, make it to where people can have an actual Apple III to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to take me a while to get to, but what I'm telling you now is, yes, it is in my plans to make a replacement Apple III board. That supports Apple III peripherals that will just work.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. To your point, though, yeah, there were only
$300 instead of like $800 plus $1 million in shipping because you have to airlift it with like special support cables. You know? Those guys in Detroit that were experts at casting transmissions that Apple found to do those cases. Oh boy, and we proved with the two that you didn't need to do that in order to get FCC to pass FCC. And that's really the whole reason for those cases was the supposed FCC requirements. So.
Yeah, it wasn't really a heat sink, and if anything, it was a heat trap.
Yeah.
But I did want to address something about 140,000 units or whatever, but it was critical. Because we did, I think I got it up to a run rate of around 250 million in 82, and I'm not sure how many sold in 83. But the key was that was money that Apple would not have made, and it funded Lisa and the Mac and the IIe. And the company would not have been able, they would have lost money. I was running the Apple II at 66 points gross margin. In fact, software and I were in a monthly battle to see who was more profitable. Because when we put the II out with the FCC approval, it cost less and we sold it for more. And I pointed people to the paint and said, well, it's really expensive paint. But the III was the mainstay of revenue during that period because the II was fading off into the III, and we really had to sell a lot of IIIs in order to make enough money to keep the company going so they could get the other stuff out the door. And it was frustrating because Steve really never appreciated that we were writing him a check every month. And writing the
if
least.
You love your iPhone, remember the Apple III saved it, made it possible.
There you go. Yeah. Well, they would. The other thing too is remember that when IBM introduced the XT, only the III was competitive with that, and when they introduced the AT, that was sort of the demise. At that point, technologically, the Apple III couldn't compete. But all the way through the XT era, which was, all the way through 84, that was a flagship business machine.
I did some back of the envelope calculations for an article that I wrote recently, and I'm not sure that everybody's probably aware. There was a video game crash in 1983, and Commodore were 100% responsible for it. And one of the things that comes up in groups for me all the time is a bunch of Commodore guys, saying, "Oh, it's the best-selling computer of all time," and of course it is, mate. Like, it's made out of plastic that they made Barbie dolls out of. For God's sake.
Yeah. It's like mac and cheese is popular too, but that doesn't make it the greatest thing.
Well, TI sold a lot of those little boxes too, but come on. Yeah.
And I'm completely uncertain, and either of you might have an answer to this one. Do you think that sales figures presented by smaller companies, so, Commodore sold about, I've got some figures here somewhere. Gross revenue from the VIC-20 was $398 million. Total revenue from the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64 was roughly $623 million in the time period of from when the Apple III was announced to when it was retired. So basically, you think that's wrong?
I find that hard to believe given the price point of that machine. I'll use U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah.
So you sell 25 million units at $250 a piece.
Yeah.
It's $600 million.
Yeah.
It's close, but that's for the entire history of the machine.
Yeah.
Not just this tiny slice of when it existed.
Yeah.
So I think when you think about it, what they're doing is they're inflating some of that numbers. It's not just the computer. It's all of the other crap they sold with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to take that with a grain of salt and realize that the times are the times are shaded by the glasses of the people who wrote the history looking back at it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of misinformation. I remember first meeting with can't remember the guy's name now, at Microsoft. So Microsoft was going to do the original CPM board for the 2, and this would have been in late 80 or I guess early 81, and I was the Apple II guy and so forth. So I met with them, and they had no idea. They had no idea how many Apple IIs we were shipping, particularly Apple IIs with discs. And that's important because there were a lot of Commodore products and a lot of Radio Shack products that really went out without a substantial number of discs. And the average number of discs that shipped with a 2 in the early 80s was a couple of drives, which you really needed to do practical apps.
Yeah.
And I remember Microsoft presented their forecast, and I think it was and asked us for feedback on the CPM board. I think they were talking about 400 or 500 a month, which made some assumptions about how many disk drive equipped Apple IIs there were. And I took a look at it and I told them, I said, you need to quadruple your forecast. Here's how many systems Apple IIs go out with a disk drive. And it was at that point it was 90% or higher. And they were like, holy moly. And they went back up to Redmond and cranked up their forecast. But there were so many, if you counted Apple IIs and the drives and the printers and the graphics tablets, all that stuff, we were selling a ton.
4 billion.
I find it hard to believe that Commodore would have sold that much stuff. Not with what they were shipping, and not at that
Yeah,
the price point was too low. The volume had been.
and that was they were pushing volume, but they're. You said, Taylor, that you were making 66 points. What was Commodore making? 5?
Yeah.
Right? They were their whole race to the bottom, trying to win market share, and all they did was dug themselves into the ground. Who's still here?
Yeah.
Well,
Who's still here?
I remember there was a lot of cloudy stuff. I remember at NCC the year that the 3 was introduced. I think they were showing a machine that had some really cool capabilities. I forget which one it was. And I went over to the booth because I was sort of on spy duty, and I peeked around the back of the machine because it looked ready to ship, and I could see the whittle marks from the X-Acto knives on the plastic case, and looking inside the slots, I could see wires. So they had basically put a hand-wired prototype on the floor and claimed they were going to ship it, or it was ready to ship. So there was a lot of, they weren't under the same constraints of the SEC that eventually became true. Anyway, I wouldn't. We sold a lot of stuff, and I don't think they sold that much dollar-wise. But I do have a great souvenir, Joe, that you'd appreciate somewhere. It's a plastic cube, kind of Lexan, kind of clear plastic cube, and inside is an apple with a 100 in it. And it was given to us by Markela, the marketing department, when we reached a run rate of $100 million a year, meaning that was the month we sold $8 million worth of Apple IIs. So it's a great souvenir. Now I think they do that probably every second.
Mm-hmm. So the point that I was going to make there is total revenue, VIC-20s and Commodore 64s around 23 million, give or take 20%, right? Apple, on the other hand, in that same time period, 4 billion. And the thing about that is, I think there are fanatical people about, certain platforms and certain brands, and it's big for them to say, the greatest computer sales in the history of all time. We sold this many machines. Yeah, but how many did you have to sell to get to that revenue base? And and then Apple produced 15% of that, but made more money in doing so.
Yeah, it was value and quality. That's what we sold it on, particularly the Apple. The Apple II was, when I took it over in, late 80, early 81, it was technically obsolete at that point. I mean, from the standpoint of, 6502, there were, Motorola was shipping 68,000s at that point, right? And so it had to be software and it had to be quality, because you couldn't sell it just based on hardware performance. Slots were great, there were plenty of peripherals, but the evangelism around supporting hardware and software was what really made that machine. And I remember a great ad we did for the 3, which drew a lot of, remember the what can you do with an Apple III the ad just featured a stack of products, a stack of software, a stack of peripherals, and the message was, this is a machine that's not just a box. It's a system, and it's an ecosystem, and that was a strong message. That's what Apple promoted. Now I got to put on my glasses to read that.
I've got to get one of those t-shirts.
Yes.
I kind of made a joke. I made a joke about it on this shirt, but there was an actual pamphlet brochure that came out that was called this. Will someone please tell me what an Apple III can do? And of course, it sounds to us today it sounds funny, but they really were trying to evangelize that product.
Yeah. Yeah,
and the ad had that stack of products on it, which was very effective. And remember, Joe, gosh, I wish I could remember his last name. We basically invented evangelism in the 3 group, because you had to go. The Apple II was, people were falling all over themselves because of the volume to do products for it. But word on the 3 was, it's low volume, it doesn't yada, yada, yada. And so we actually had to put people in the field to tell that story to developers. And it worked. We got the stuff done.
Do either of you guys think I'm correct in arguing that the Apple III has sprites via its typeface in RAM, the fonts in RAM?
I'm not sure I heard that. Has what?
So one of the arguments that I frequently have is I believe.
Oh, sprites.
Yes, I believe that having the ability to customize the character set and change it on demand, and then have ultimate control over what they do, how they do it. So you might have, like the running horses demo, right? You might have 5 horses scrolling across the machine, and then you can select whether those colours are going to invert, or you've got some console driver commands over that. I call that sprites.
Well, yeah, the question, if you're doing that with character animation, for example, which is like what I did with Bugmania, you could certainly argue that. The question is just how fluid is that, sprite motion. Yeah, in other words, can I slap that character in high res anywhere on the screen? Yeah. And then you can make it appear to move smoothly. Yeah. It's just a question of how fast you can write. I think there were a couple of invocables that could be written that could make that a lot easier, because certainly the hardware is capable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have, I wouldn't say that the Apple III has sprites in the same concept that many people would think that it does.
Yeah. Right.
Because the characters are still bound within their grid.
Yeah.
So you can't put it in just floating around wherever. But with some very careful usage of on the fly redrawing. The NES did this way later, but the Apple III can do it now, where if you very carefully manipulate what's in different character sets, you could, in theory, as Taylor says here, move stuff around in a much more fluid motion. Now, you might get a little bit of what's called attribute clash, because you might not be able to fill in the rest of that sprite area with other background graphics or whatever. But you could achieve it to some extent through hot rewrites, so to speak. But it's not exactly what you might think of the sprites.
Yeah, there's not a hardware blitter, for instance, as there are in the classic sprite machines. And to Joe's point, aliasing out or with the background, so you could move it across an existing, field. That wouldn't really work. But within a 4-character cell, you can create, motions. You just have to be thinking about how you redefine that character. I mean, in Bugmania, it was just redid the characters in the string, and if the gunshot hit the head, it disappeared. If it hit the tail dropped off, but it was and got replaced. But it's doable. It's just tedious to do it with character animation.
Guys, I thought I might just open it up for questions from people in the room. Does anybody have a question?
Anyone want to ask anything about the Apple III?
Yeah, you were talking about writing software like homebrew type stuff. So I've got a few things, like there's one for the Sega Genesis where it's essentially like a whole IE that plugs into Visual Studio. So you write C code, and then you just go bang, and it comes out as a Genesis ROM. Or there's stuff for Z80, like I've got an Amstrad computer, and again you write in C on your PC, and then you can compile to Z80 assembly. Is there something like that for the Apple III, or is that something that you're working on?
Madeleine may know a little bit more about that, because she's kind of really into the software scene. I have not heard of any modern solution, modern IDE that allows you to do such things. And if it's lacking, again, I don't want to be absolutely, it doesn't exist because I haven't seen it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If it's not in the database, it doesn't exist. But if it doesn't exist, that is something that needs to happen, because then by having high-level libraries to be able to create invocables, to be able to create drivers, to be able to create applications that know the Apple III's memory layout and all of that, it would make it way easier to do these things, right? Because you're limited by the tools that you have that run on the 3 itself. And so you're doing it in an emulator, and then you're trying to like serial upload it with ADT Pro to an actual 3 to test it, because as we all know, the emulators aren't perfect. You got to test it on real hardware. So yeah, I think having something like that would be super awesome. So any smart programmers out there want to do it?
Well, yeah, it's a good question about, there were plenty of language implementations that had various IDEs. So the Fortran and COBOL were pretty good. Pascal obviously has an environment. I don't know if Tim ever put his assembler, which was insanely fast and had a good editor and stuff with it. I don't know if he ever put that in the public domain. I know that that Arkley's EdAsm made it out the door. But in terms of a high-level IDE like C or something like that, I haven't seen an implementation at all. So, it's not that you couldn't write it. I mean, there were plenty of. At one point, there was actually a guy had a part of the Pascal system that could blow selected Pascal code out to assembly for higher performance. That floated around for a while, but no, not something that would even be close to be called modern. I don't think, that I've seen anyway. On the other hand, Business Basic with invocables is a hell of a development environment. And speaking of plugging, Madeleine, the book is coming out. Actually, it's been introduced by Call Apple. So if anybody wants to see all those old Business Basic programming examples, including the graphic stuff, that will be published by Call Apple pretty soon, my old Soft Talk columns. And you can actually, they said they're even putting in hardcover. Can you believe that? I hope I get one of those from my, I'll leave it in my will to my son, I suppose. Yeah, there it is. Yay. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Although I will say that I wouldn't guarantee it's all bug-free. I remember I had just written a chapter on databases, or one of the chapters on database, and I was showing hashing algorithms and so forth. A lot of my stuff came out of Knuth and converted for Business Basic. So I get this, it was either a letter or a phone call, I can't remember what, from a guy who said, hey, I'm writing this application for a bank, a database for the bank, and there's a bug in your software. You've got to fix it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I need to put a big banner in the next month's column that says, pay no attention to any of the code in this article. But I was able to help him, fortunately. But it shows people were really desperate to pick up stuff for applications at the time. But I scared the hell out of me. Thank goodness it wasn't a medical application.
And Dave.
Now, just one last question. This is probably for you, Taylor. With the Apple III coming before the Lisa and kind of running concurrently, did Apple internally use the Apple III as a tool for Lisa development, or for any of the service aspects of Lisa? Like, I know that the Apple III was the low-level formatter for the profile hard drives, for instance. Was the Apple III used as a tool for the Lisa development or serviceability in any way that you're aware of?
It was on everybody's desk at that point. Shortly after the 3 shipped, all the marketing and engineering groups and stuff like that everybody at Apple, of course, had an Apple, and they were given one free by the company, which was quite unusual at the time, obviously. But everybody had a 3 on their desk, so they did all their business work and design work and stuff like that. But in terms of the development environment for the Lisa, that was I forget what they used to boot it up, but they got Pascal running and then did most of their development work on prototypes of that. Remember, the Lisa was in its box and looked like a Lisa about the time that the Apple III was starting to ship. The delay was not the hardware. The hardware was done in '81, and that was part of the problem with the Lisa. It just took them 2 years longer than they thought to get the software done. Right. And part of that was because Scotty nixed there was a full multitasking OS that Stein had written for the Lisa, but it was killed, and instead they came up with that stupid software yield, scheme, and that made writing the software much, much harder. Yeah. But no, the Lisa existed, and the IDE for it existed by '81 for sure. Actually, probably late '80. Which was the other problem the Lisa had, was that the hardware was basically set in 1980. The 5 megahertz 68,000. That was all they had in 1980 from Motorola, and they never updated the hardware. The discrete component layouts on the board, they never they just left the hardware design in place, and then in '83 when they shipped it, it was way behind time.
Yeah.
So it was that's another whole story how Apple managed to cripple that product.
Yeah, very well.
But good question. I actually don't. The original booted up IDE for the Lisa. I don't know what hardware they used, but they had, like I said, they had Lisa hardware in 1980, so they could have probably used that directly.
Fair enough. Okay, well, look, I know it's getting very late for you gents. I think it's midnight in the US right now where you guys are.
It is.
So we're going to break here and say goodnight to you both. I think, Joe, I'll reach out to you, Joe. In talking about evangelizing the Apple III and maybe getting something developed and happening with the Apple III or getting people interested again. So the Australian Computer Museum has been working for the last few years heavily on the Retro Challenge. And specifically the October Retro Challenge. So maybe we could work together to come up with a prize for someone who developed something specifically for the Apple III. And maybe we could get some people interested in throwing their hat into the ring and coming up with some maybe new software or a new peripheral and get some of this stuff happening and get people interested in the Apple III again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we need. We need people who want to pick up the machine and play with it and tell everybody, hey, by the way, did you know how cool this thing is?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, good computer science exercise to go through that sauce manual. By the way, for more history like we chatted about today, you can also check out, I think it's on YouTube, but it's Computer History Museum. Stuck me in front of a camera for about 4 or 5 hours some years ago, and I rattled on about some of this stuff in excruciating detail. So you'll find that online and there's a lot of the Apple III stories that we told there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us both today. It's been wonderful. It's been a very interesting thing, and it's nice to have someone new to the Apple III along with someone that developed the Apple III together talking to us. And look, it's been wonderful to have you. So thank you guys, and thanks for joining us today. Okay.
Most welcome.
Thank you guys for being awesome, awesome hosts for us tonight.
Well, we hope to see you here in Australia at some point.
Speak our spiel.
Yes.
Exactly. And congratulations to you guys on on having technology that's been bulletproof for 2 hours. That's that's not my experience in long-range conferencing.
Yeah.
So
And look,
nice job of pulling that together technically.
Thank you to Madeleine for obviously suggesting this event today. So we're going to break, have lunch, and then we're actually going to do some demos on Apple III stuff, and people are going to get to play with Apple IIIs. We've actually got 3 Apple IIIs running at the moment here physically, and a 4th in my car for people to kind of have a play with. So yeah, it's the most Apple IIIs in Australia are right here in this room right now.
Enjoy. And if there's a recording of this, I'd love to get a link to it.
Yeah, look, we will. Adrian's been recording it this morning, so we'll be cutting it up and putting it online soon.
Cool.
Perfect.
Awesome.
No worries.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining
again.
us, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Taylor.
You
Thank
bet.
you, Joe.
Thanks, guys.
No worries. I can hang up. There we go.